All right, so welcome to this deep dive where we're going to be talking all about what it takes to become a structural engineer.
Sounds good.
We've had a bunch of listeners reach out who are interested in this field, and
Yeah.
they sent in some interview questions that they've either encountered or that they're expecting to see.
Okay.
And we thought this would be a great way to kind of um, explore what it really takes.
Mm,
Not just what they're going to ask you in an interview,
right.
but what it says about the skills that you need and the kind of challenges you might be facing,
Right.
and maybe even some tips for how to stand out as a candidate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even if you're not going on an interview right now, just kind of understanding these questions
Mhm.
can help you see what you might need to develop further or, kind of like we're reverse engineering the job description a little bit.
I love that reverse engineering the job description. And, one of the things that our source material really emphasizes is
Yeah.
that it's so much more than just textbook knowledge.
Yeah.
So I'm curious from your perspective, when interviewers are asking these questions, what are they really looking for?
Yeah, I think it's really trying to gauge how you apply that knowledge. Like
Yeah.
anyone can memorize formulas or,
Right.
the procedure for this or that, but can you solve real world problems? Can
Yeah.
you adapt to unexpected situations? Can you collaborate effectively on a team?
Mm.
And that's kind of what these questions try to get at.
So they really want to know, like, can you think on your feet and not just regurgitate information?
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Now, our source breaks down these questions into 5 categories.
Okay.
They talk about technical questions,
Yeah.
project experience, behavioral problem solving, and then regulatory.
Mm-hmm.
So curious, what was there a particular question that stood out to you that you thought was particularly interesting or revealing?
I think one that always comes up is how do you ensure your designs comply with building codes and regulations?
Oh, yeah?
It might seem straightforward, but I think it reveals a lot about a candidate's understanding of, the responsibility of the job.
Because it's not just about the math, it's about people's safety, right?
Exactly. And a good answer will show that you understand the real world impact of your designs, that you're not
Oh,
just crunching numbers in a vacuum.
yeah, for sure. Now, the source also mentions some specific software like SAP 2000, ETBS Revit structure.
Mm-hmm.
Are those really essential to know going into the field?
Absolutely. I mean, those are industry standards for a reason,
Yep.
and mastering those tools allows for much more efficient and accurate modeling and analysis and design of
Check.
complex structures. And you could try to do it all by hand, but
Right.
you'd be left behind.
So it's not just a bullet point on your resume, you're
Yeah.
actually using these tools.
Yes.
Yeah. What about adapting to unexpected site conditions? Because I feel like that's something that maybe everyone going into this field is a little bit worried about.
Yeah,
And there's a question about that in here.
totally. And that's one of the biggest challenges in this field, I think, is no matter how well you plan,
Mm-hmm.
there will always be surprises on a construction site.
Right?
And the source gives a great example where unsuitable soil conditions were discovered during excavation.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah.
What kind of problems does that cause?
Yeah. So, I mean, that means reevaluating the entire foundation design.
Wow.
Imagine like you're building on what you think is solid ground and it turns out to be more like pudding.
Okay.
You need to think on your feet, conduct further analysis, maybe even propose a whole new foundation system. And it's, it happened to me early in my career working on a bridge project.
Hold on. You had a pudding ground situation.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Hold on.
during the site survey, everything looked fine.
Mhm.
But when we started excavating, we hit a layer of bedrock that was not on any of the maps.
Oh, wow. So what do you do in that situation? You can't just like build the bridge on pudding.
No, we had to bring in a geologist to analyze the bedrock and then redesign the foundations to be anchored directly into it.
Wow.
So it added a lot of time complexity,
Sure.
but we got it done.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, that sounds like the ultimate test of your adaptability.
Yeah, definitely.
Speaking of challenges, I have to say the one that always blows my mind is designing for earthquakes,
Right.
because that just seems incredibly complex.
It is, but it's also really fascinating because you're essentially designing a structure to withstand incredible forces. And the key concepts are ductility, redundancy, and energy dissipation.
Okay, break those down for me without going too technical.
Okay, so think of it this way. Ductility is like the structure's ability to bend without breaking.
Yeah.
Redundancy is like having backup systems, so if one part fails, the whole thing doesn't collapse.
Right.
And energy dissipation is about absorbing the earthquake's energy so the building doesn't shake itself apart.
So it's like shock absorbers for a building.
Exactly. And the source mentions a building with base isolators, which are like these giant shock absorbers at the base of the structure.
I see.
So yeah, it's a remarkable example of how we can engineer buildings to withstand even the most powerful forces.
That's incredible, and it shows the level of ingenuity involved.
Yeah.
Another thing that stood out to me from these questions is how much they focused on teamwork.
Yes. It
Yeah.
seems like structural engineering is not a solo job.
Not at all. You're constantly collaborating with architects, other engineers, contractors,
Oh,
clients,
wow.
everybody.
So communication skills are just as important as technical ones.
Absolutely. Without a doubt, you could have the most brilliant design.
Right.
But if you can't explain it to your team and get their input and work together to solve problems, doesn't matter.
So it's not just about building structures, it's about building relationships too.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. And this leads me to another big topic that I wanted to touch on, which is sustainability.
Right.
It feels like that's woven into every aspect of engineering these days.
Yeah, it's not just a trend. I mean, it's a responsibility.
And our source mentions using recycled steel and maximizing natural light as examples,
Right.
but it goes far beyond that.
I'm curious, what are some of the other ways that sustainability is impacting structural engineering?
Well, we're seeing incredible innovations in sustainable materials like bioconcrete that actually absorbs CO2 from the atmosphere.
Wow.
There's also a huge push for passive design strategies where you use the building itself to regulate temperature and minimize energy consumption. So it's a really exciting time to be in the field.
It sounds like sustainability is pushing the boundaries of what's possible
Absolutely.
in structural engineering. Yeah. Now, shifting gears a little bit,
Yeah.
what about those personal qualities that make a candidate stand out
Yeah.
in an interview?
Well, of course, technical proficiency is a given.
Oh, right.
But beyond that, it's about problem solving, attention to detail, clear communication, and strong collaboration skills.
Okay.
And one more thing.
I'm listening.
Passion. You need to show a genuine enthusiasm for the field,
Yeah.
a desire to keep learning and pushing the boundaries. Because structural engineering is constantly evolving, so a willingness to adapt and embrace new technologies is crucial.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Speaking of learning, I love that our source includes questions that the candidate should ask during the interview because it is a two-way street, right?
Absolutely. And asking thoughtful questions shows that you're engaged and proactive.
Right.
It's also a chance for you to gather information and decide if the company is a good fit for you.
Oh, that's a great point. So what are some of the key questions that you should be asking?
You could ask things like, what types of projects does your firm typically undertake? Or what are some of the biggest engineering challenges you've faced recently?
That's good.
Those questions show that you're thinking critically and that you're interested in the real work that they do.
Yeah, and it gives you a sense of the company's culture and values, too.
Exactly. You want to find a place where you can grow, learn, and be challenged.
Yeah.
It's about finding the right environment to build not just your skills, but also your career.
And it's interesting because, we talk about this ideal candidate, but I think it's important to acknowledge that everybody makes mistakes, right?
Of course, yeah.
So how do you address those in an interview setting?
Yeah, it's not about hiding your mistakes. It's about owning them.
Okay.
Be honest about challenges you've faced, but focus on what you learned from them.
So it's about turning a negative into a positive, showing that you can learn and grow.
Right.
And being specific.
Exactly. Don't just say, I'm a good problem solver. Walk them through a situation where you faced a complex problem, explain your thought process,
Yeah.
highlight the steps you took to find a solution. You've got some great stories from your career. I bet you've had your share of challenges.
Oh, definitely. Speaking of stories, I'm curious to hear about a time where your problem-solving skills were really put to the test.
Well, one project that comes to mind is the renovation of a historic building.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It was this beautiful old structure with intricate details, but the original drawings were incomplete and some of the structural elements had deteriorated over time.
Ugh, that sounds like a nightmare for a structural engineer.
It was definitely challenging.
Yeah.
We had to carefully assess the existing structure, figure out which parts needed reinforcement or replacement, and design new elements that would seamlessly integrate with the historic fabric of the building.
So you're not just an engineer. You're a bit of a historian and an architect as well.
Exactly, and it required a lot of collaboration with conservation experts and a meticulous eye for detail.
Yeah.
We even had to get creative and use modern materials that mimic the look and feel of the originals.
It's fascinating how you can blend the old and the new like that.
Yeah.
What was the most rewarding part of that project for you?
Seeing that historic building restored to its former glory, knowing it was structurally sound for generations to come, that's the kind of impact you can have as a structural engineer.
Yeah, it's amazing how you can help preserve history while also making sure those structures are safe. for people to enjoy. As we've been talking, it's clear that structural engineering is so much more than just beams and columns.
It really is. It's about creating spaces where people can live, work, and play.
Yeah.
It's about shaping the world around us.
And it requires such a diverse skill set. I mean,
Yeah.
we've talked about technical proficiency, problem solving, communication adaptability.
Mm.
Is there anything else that you would add to that list?
A passion for continuous learning.
Well, that's a good one.
The field is constantly evolving with new technologies and approaches emerging all the time.
Right.
The best structural engineers never stop learning and growing.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And that leads me back to those interview questions.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned that candidates should ask thoughtful questions of their own.
Yes.
What are some other examples of good questions to ask?
Besides the ones we've already discussed, you could ask about the company's culture and their approach to professional development.
Mm-hmm.
Do they encourage continued education? Do they have mentorship programs? These are all things you'll want to know as you embark on your career.
Right. It's about finding a company that invests in their employees and supports their growth.
Exactly. You're not just looking for a job. You're looking for a place where you can build a fulfilling career.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to touch on one more important aspect of the interview process,
Okay.
which is showcasing your problem-solving abilities.
Right.
Our source gives some great advice on how to talk about past failures or challenges. And it's not about hiding your mistakes.
Right.
No.
It's about demonstrating how you learned and grew from those experiences. Everyone makes mistakes, but it's how you handle them that matters.
So be honest, be specific, and focus on the lessons you learned.
Exactly.
You mentioned earlier that you had a putting ground situation early in your career. I'm curious, what was your biggest takeaway from that experience?
Well, it taught me the importance of thorough site investigations and being prepared for the unexpected. No matter how much data you have, there will always be surprises in the field.
Right, so that adaptability is key to being a successful structural engineer.
Absolutely. You need to be able to think on your feet, come up with creative solutions, and work collaboratively to overcome challenges.
Now, I know we've covered a lot of ground today, but
Yeah.
is there any final advice you would give to someone considering a career in structural engineering?
I would say don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. Go beyond the textbooks and look for inspiration in the world around you.
That's such great advice.
Yeah.
There are amazing examples of structural ingenuity everywhere you look.
Exactly. Take a walk around your city and pay attention to the buildings, the bridges, the infrastructure that makes modern life possible. Think about the forces at play, the challenges the engineers had to overcome the creative solutions they came up with.
It's like a treasure hunt for structural wonders.
And who knows, maybe one day you'll be designing the structures that inspire future generations of engineers.
That's a beautiful thought.
Hmm.
Well, on that note, I think we've covered a lot in this deep dive. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and insights.
It's been my pleasure. I always enjoy these conversations.
And to our listener, thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery. We hope you've gained a deeper understanding of what it takes to be a structural engineer. Before we move on to part 2, I want to leave you with this thought. As you're exploring those structures, remember that structural engineering isn't just about skyscrapers and bridges.
Right.
There are so many specialized areas within the field. What are some examples that you find particularly interesting?
One that always captivates me is forensic structural engineering. It's like being a detective,
Okay.
investigating structural failures and figuring out, what caused a collapse or damage.
That sounds intense. What kind of skills are essential for that kind of work?
You need a keen eye for detail, a deep understanding of structural behavior, and the ability to kind of piece together clues like a puzzle.
Yeah.
It's a challenging but incredibly rewarding field.
It's like you're solving mysteries in the world of structures. What other specializations come to mind?
Well, we touched on historic preservation earlier. It's this fascinating blend of engineering and history where you're tasked with preserving these architectural treasures for future generations.
Yeah, it's incredible how you can kind of bridge the gap between the past and the present, making sure those historic buildings are both beautiful and safe.
Yeah.
And then there's sustainable design, which is becoming increasingly important.
Yes.
These engineers are pushing the boundaries of what's possible with eco-friendly materials and energy-efficient building practices. What are some of the most exciting developments that you're seeing in that area?
Well, we're seeing amazing innovations in materials like bioconcrete, which actually absorbs CO2 from the atmosphere.
Wow.
There's also a growing focus on passive design strategies where you harness natural elements like sunlight and wind to regulate temperature and reduce energy consumption.
It sounds like sustainable design is really pushing the envelope of what's possible in structural engineering.
Yeah.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to touch on one more area that seems particularly futuristic, which is structural health monitoring.
Ah, yes. This is a rapidly growing field.
Okay.
We're now able to embed sensors in structures
Okay.
to track their performance over time and detect potential problems before they become serious.
So it's like giving buildings a regular checkup to
Exactly.
make sure they're staying healthy. What are some of the potential benefits of this technology?
Well, it has the potential to revolutionize how we design, maintain, and interact with our structures.
Okay.
Imagine being able to predict and prevent structural failures,
Hmm.
optimize maintenance schedules, and even make buildings more responsive to their environment.
So it sounds like structural health monitoring could have a huge impact on safety sustainability
Yeah.
and just the overall lifespan of our structures.
Absolutely. It's a game changer for the field, and it's just one example of how technology is shaping the future of structural engineering.
It's incredible to think about all the possibilities that lie ahead. As we wrap up this deep dive, is there any final piece of advice you would give to our listener who's interested in pursuing a career in structural engineering?
I would say embrace the challenges. This is a field that will constantly push you to learn and grow. Don't be afraid to ask questions, seek out mentors, and never stop exploring new ideas.
That's such great advice.
Mm.
Remember, structural engineering is more than just a job. It's a chance to shape the world around us.
And to have a real impact on people's lives. From the buildings we live and work in to the bridges that connect us to the infrastructure that supports our communities, structural engineers play a vital role in making the world a better place.
Well said. Thank you again for sharing your expertise and passion with us today.
It was my pleasure.
And to our listener, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of structural engineering. We hope you found it informative, inspiring, and maybe even a little bit mind-blowing. Remember, the next time you walk past a building or a bridge, take a moment to appreciate the ingenuity and hard work that went into creating it. There's a whole world of structural wonders out there just waiting to be discovered. Until next time, keep exploring and keep building. Okay, so as you're out there looking at these structures, I think it's also worth remembering that structural engineering isn't just about skyscrapers and bridges.
Yeah, it's definitely not.
There are so many specialized areas within the field. What are some examples that you find particularly interesting?
Well, one that always kind of captivates me is forensic structural engineering.
Forensic structural engineering.
Yeah, it's like being a detective.
Okay.
You're investigating structural failures and trying to figure out like what caused a collapse or damage.
So like a CSI for buildings.
Exactly.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
What kind of skills would you say are essential for that kind of work?
Well, you definitely need a keen eye for detail and a deep understanding of structural behavior and the ability to kind of piece together clues like a puzzle.
So you really do have to be a detective.
You do. It's a challenging but incredibly rewarding field.
I can imagine. What other specializations come to mind?
Well, we touched on historic preservation earlier.
Right.
It's this fascinating blend of engineering and history where you're tasked with preserving these architectural treasures for future generations.
It's amazing how you can bridge the gap between the past and the present and, make sure that these historic buildings are both beautiful and safe.
Absolutely. And then there's sustainable design, which is becoming increasingly important.
Yeah, we talked about that.
And these engineers are pushing the boundaries of what's possible with eco-friendly materials and energy-efficient building practices.
I'm curious, what are some of the most exciting developments you're seeing in that area?
Well, we're seeing incredible innovations in materials like bioconcrete, which actually absorbs CO2 from the atmosphere.
Wow.
There's also a growing focus on passive design strategies,
Where you can harness natural elements like sunlight and wind to regulate temperature and reduce energy consumption.
That's incredible. It sounds like sustainable design is really pushing the envelope of what's possible in structural engineering. Now, before we wrap up, I want to touch on one more area that seems particularly futuristic,
Okay.
and that's structural health monitoring.
Ah, yes. This is a rapidly growing field.
Okay.
We're now able to embed sensors and structures to track their performance over time and detect potential problems before they become serious.
Oh, wow. So it's like giving buildings a regular checkup to
Exactly.
make sure they're staying healthy. What are some of the potential benefits of that?
Well, it has the potential to completely revolutionize how we design, maintain, and interact with our structures.
Okay.
Imagine being able to predict and prevent structural failures,
Yeah.
optimize maintenance schedules, and even make buildings more responsive to their environment.
That's incredible.
Uh,
So structural health monitoring could have a huge impact on safety, sustainability, and just the overall lifespan of our structures. Absolutely. It's a game changer, and it's just one example of how technology is shaping the future of structural engineering.
wow, it's incredible to think about all the possibilities that lie ahead. As we wrap up this deep dive, is there any final piece of advice you would give to our listener who is interested in pursuing a career in structural engineering?
I would say embrace the challenges. This is a field that will constantly push you to learn and grow. Don't be afraid to ask questions, seek out mentors, and never stop exploring new ideas.
That's such great advice. Remember, structural engineering is more than just a job. It's a chance to shape the world around us.
And to have a real impact on people's lives. From the buildings we live and work in to the bridges that connect us to the infrastructure that supports our communities, structural engineers play a vital role in making the world a better place.
So well said. Thank you again for sharing your expertise and your passion with us today.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listener, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of structural engineering. We hope you found it informative, inspiring, and maybe even a little bit mind-blowing. Remember, the next time you walk past a building or a bridge, take a moment to appreciate the ingenuity and the hard work that went into creating it. There's a whole world of structural wonders out there just waiting to be discovered. So until next time, keep exploring and keep building.